rocking to sleep. In this study, the individuals are 18 healthy young adults, and the variables are whatever we record for each one of them. And so we are told that this is the latency to deep sleep and that it is measured in minutes. So this is a quantitative variable. We are told that the participants have to do something in random order. So this is not their choice. And that tells us that this is an experiment. We now have to think what type of experimental design. And here we can see that there's mention of a random order because, in fact, there are two things that each participant is told to do. On one night, they sleep in a stationary bed, and on another night, they sleep in a bed that gently rocks. So that means each individual is going to do two things, and what's going to be randomized is the order. And so this is an experiment with a match pair design, also called crossover design, because when you draw out the timeline, you see that at first individuals are randomly assigned to sleep in either the stationary or the rocking bed. And then as we move on to the next time they come, they will switch or cross over to the other condition. In terms of how the information is going to be organized, this would be in a data set, one row for each individual, and then we'll have one column for their latency to deep sleep when they were sleeping in a stationary bed, and another column for their latency to deep sleep when they were sleeping in a rocking bed, which means that we can, for each individual, compute how much faster do they get to deep sleep with, for example, the stationary versus the rocking bed. So how is this design helpful with the study's objective? How do you know whether something is helpful? It can only be helpful relative to something else. So this is why here we want to compare a stationary bed with a rocking bed and not just measure people's sleep when they are in a rocking bed. The interest of the match pair or crossover design is that we can do that comparison for each individual. So for each person, let's say it's somebody who falls asleep, it takes them a long time before they fall asleep and before they get to deep sleep. Well, you can see whether it's slightly faster or slower with the rocking bed for such a person. And you can do that for every individual. So that makes it easier to find out if there is some difference between the two conditions. The fact that this is an experiment also helps us figure out whether any recorded difference between the two conditions would be because of those conditions, right? So that leads us to the next question. What can we reasonably conclude from this study? So we are told here that a difference was noticed on average. So very importantly, on average means overall in the aggregate. That does not necessarily imply that this was true for every individual. So that means that here, because the participants did not choose to sleep in the rocking bed, that was imposed. So therefore, the condition rocking bed is not itself associated with how the person was feeling. One caveat though, because this is done in a lab, we do not know whether a similar difference would be observed in a person's own environment. Maybe in their own environment, the rocking bed doesn't do much. Maybe it's helpful when you are in a strange, unfamiliar situation that soothes the person and they can get to deep sleep faster. But maybe in the home, it makes no difference. Or also, maybe even if it makes a difference at first, maybe after a while, the body habituates and there's no more difference in how fast people get to deep sleep. So what we know is that in lab conditions, in the short term, healthy young adults get to deep sleep faster with the rocking bed than with the stationary bed on average. So that does not also mean that something similar would be found for people who might need a sleeping head, like, for example, people with insomnia or other sleeping issues.